Welcome back everyone. Hi, if you're new, I'm Tori, and today we are finally done talking about the DNFs of the year, the worst books of the year, the surprises, like all of that. We are finally talking about the top 10 best books that I read in 2023. So if you guys are new here, just a few quick things before we jump in. This is a top 10 list. I only read, anywhere from 50 to 70 books a year. So I always love to do a top 10. I feel like that's a good, clean, solid cutoff number. I feel like anything above 10 for me personally is just, it doesn't feel as special. And the other thing is that this list is ranked. So we're going to start at my 10th best book and we're going to keep working our way up to number one. And the books are just going to keep getting better and better and better as we go along throughout the video. The other thing to note is that I don't include multiple books in a series in different spots. I don't include the same author twice, and I don't include rereads. I feel like that makes it special that every book was new to me in 2023. And that's the other thing. These books weren't necessarily published this year, although a few were. They were just all books that I read this year. So I think that's everything we need to jump in. I'm looking at the books around me and just getting really excited. I just can't believe we're here again doing another top 10 of the year video. So I hope you guys enjoy. Let's get into it. So at number 10, I'm gonna do something that I have never done in all of my years on BookTube, and that is have an entire trilogy in one spot. And that trilogy is the Wayward Pines trilogy by Blake Crouch. I don't think since I've been on BookTube I've ever started and finished a trilogy or a series in a year where every book in that series deserved to be in the top 10. So this is new for both of us. I know at this point you guys are probably sick of me talking about the Wayward Pines trilogy, because truly I have been talking about this series all year, because Pines was the very first book that I finished in 2023, and I have just not stopped talking about this trilogy. I really thought I was going to be giving Blake Crouch a rest in 2023. I've read several of his books at this point, but this trilogy obviously had other plans, and it was incredible. This series is just filled with so many amazing twists and turns and just like kind of what would you do situations. And then as we begin to get deeper into the trilogy, Blake Crouch just begins blending all these different genres. We got thriller and horror and suspense, and it just becomes so wild. For this trilogy, we have book one, Pines, the second book is Wayward, and the third and final book is The Last Town. And in this series, our main character, Ethan Burke, is a federal agent, and his boss sends him to the town of Wayward Pines when two of his other fellow agents go missing in this town. So Ethan gets there and things are just so strange. They're creepy, the people are creepy, the town is just completely odd, and it just begins to spiral from there. Ethan, he can't call his boss who sent him there. He can't get a phone call out to his wife. No one really seems that interested to help him figure out what's going on. I keep saying it, but this truly is just a wild ride of a series. And I've been saying this too all year, but if you love something like the show Twin Peaks or the video game Alan Wake, what are you doing if you haven't read this yet? This is perfect. If you still have not read the Wayward Pines trilogy, I cannot recommend it enough. It was such a fun time. And then coming in at number 9, this is the first 2023 release that is making the list, and I just have not stopped thinking about it, and that is The Adventures of Amina Al-Sarafi by Shannon Chakraborty. I love this book. I think this has such an incredibly rich historical setting to it. It just feels so vivid when you're reading it, and just in addition to all of that, the cast of characters really makes this book. Sometimes when you read a book and characters are supposed to be best friends or even just be well acquainted, and you just get the feeling that they just don't know each other very well, or there's not that chemistry there with those characters. That is not the case in Amina Al-Sarafi. Amina and her crew, you feel like they have shared history, like they've been through things together. But just even on top of that, I really love the themes of motherhood that is explored in this book. I think a lot of the time society makes them feel like, they have to give up who they are or the things that they love or the dreams that they had in order to be a parent. It makes them feel like they can't have everything. And I'm not a parent, but just having experienced that and watching my mother make sacrifices and put aside the things that she dreamed about and stuff like that just to give me the life that I had. I can see that. I can see that in Amina, and I just think it was just so beautifully done and beautifully explored over the course of this story, on top of just having this incredible sense of adventure. I love the way it was all blended together in this. If you guys are unfamiliar and still haven't read this yet, our main character, Amina Al-Sarafi, she is a retired pirate, a captain, and she thinks she's out of the game, but this wealthy woman approaches her in her home and basically forces her out on one more adventure. And this is also something that Amina feels like she owes one of her former crewmates. She spends time, gathering up her old crew members for one more adventure, and it just really is that. It is pure adventure, and it's just incredible. Amina is narrating her story to another character, and it's good. It's just full of humor and love and adventure, and the the joys of being a parent, the hardships of it, the sacrifices, and I just thought it was so wonderful. So I love Amina. I cannot wait to read book 2. I thought this was incredible. Coming in at number 8, I am so excited about this one, you guys. That is These Burning Stars by Bethany Jacobs, and this is the first book in a brand new sci-fi series called the Kingdom Trilogy. I mentioned this in another video, but I'm desperate for book 2. This was so incredible. I think this has to be one of my favorite sci-fi debuts since A Memory Called Empire, which came out in 2019. So that is how much I love this book. This is described as a cat and mouse game across the galaxy, and that is what you get, but it is so much more than that. It's so layered, it's so full of politics and, you know, different cultures on these planets, and just some really compelling characters. Some of the best characters I think I've read in 2023, especially one of them. We have a few main characters in this story. The first one is June. She's this young thief. She's a hacker, a very skilled hacker, but her entire world changes when a piece of information that is really detrimental to one of the powerful families in the kingdom falls into her lap. So that's her story going on. Then we have 2 other characters. One is Chono and the other one is Asek Nightfoot. And Asek is a member of this powerful family, and the 2 of them are sent out by the kingdom to go track this girl down and get that information back. And then we have our other character, Six, and Six is fascinating. Six just feels like this figure, this untouchable figure that just kind of hovers over the entire story. They create the motivations for other characters in the story. It is just incredible. And so we have those 2 characters that are looking for June, but Six, larger than life Six, they kind of have their eye on everybody over the course of this story. And the character Asek Nightfoot is obsessed. Like, you think you know obsession, you don't. Asek is obsessed with Six, and that just makes one of the most compelling dynamics I have read this entire year. Actually, Asek herself is just one of the best characters that I've read in 2023. She is terrible. I'm talking about no redeeming qualities, toxic character, everybody's scared of her. She can just really shoot you on the spot for no reason, kind of terrible. I love her. Not only is this information that landed in our hacker June's lap really detrimental to this powerful family, it could really bring the kingdom as a whole to its knees because it implicates this family in this planet-wide genocide that happened about 70 or so years ago. So we're also dealing with the intricacies and the politics of that and things being covered up. All of the characters in here are incredible. Even the side characters, like, I love this. Just even the entire structure of this kingdom is so interesting. You have, you know, the secretaries and the clerics and the cloaks, and it is all so good. You guys really don't understand. I need book 2. I need it immediately. I will take an unfinished version of book 2 at this point. Like, just take pity on me and just send me the rough draft. I'll read it. These Burning Stars was incredible. Just, again, it's on this list. One of the best books that I read in 2023. I can't get over it. I tabbed so much in this book, and I still go back and flip through so many scenes that I tabbed. Just so good. Coming in at number 7 in my Oscars books video, I mentioned that The Stars Undying by Emery Robin was on this best books of 2023 list, but one of my recent reads knocked it out of the top 10, and that book is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. I thought this was phenomenal. I love this book. I don't know where to start with The Priory of the Orange Tree. This book is 800 pages. It is thick. I'm pretty sure it could be used as a weapon. Even before going into The Priory of the Orange Tree, just the way I've heard Samantha Shannon speak about this book, the way that I've heard people who love this book praise it, it was all done in a way that just really made me feel like this was a story that was really going to resonate with me. I am so happy that that turned out to be the case. This was absolutely incredible. This is the kind of book you read and you truly feel like the author is a storyteller. Like, the prose itself is good, the writing is good, but this feels like just an epic and incredible story. It's the kind of book that every time I opened it, I just felt lost in. I would sink into this world and just be completely immersed. This story feels real, quite honestly, or maybe it's just because I spent so long with these characters, but this story feels real. The major conflict that happened in this feels like something that actually happened. I love how layered this world building is, and the way that it unfolds is done in a way that honestly just feels beautiful. Before coming into Priory, I actually had no idea what this book was about. I knew kind of vague things. I knew that this was a land that had dragons, but as far as the actual story goes, I knew next to nothing coming into this. You know, in all my times listening to people gush about Priory or rant about Priory, I was never really grasping what the story of this book was supposed to be. And now I know why, because this book is a lot to describe, but it's actually not a lot to take in when you're reading it. When you're reading it, you just feel, again, very immersed in this world, feel very comfortable while you're reading it. But if some of you out there were like me and you still have just this vague idea of what Priory is about, let's break it down. The foundation of the story is that the world is huge, but it is broken up into two distinct parts. We have the West and we have the East, and the people in those parts of the world have very different ideas about dragons. The East basically respects them as gods, but the West has kind of more of a dark history with dragons. And there was one dragon so long ago who was banished, and now in our present day story there is a very real threat that something with this dragon could be about to happen again. That is like the absolute most basic premise that I can give you without really getting into, you know, deeper into the story, getting deeper into spoiler territory. But we are following 4 distinct characters in those different parts of the world. We have 2 in the West and 2 in the East, and it was all just incredible. This is a world to me that feels so well realized. I loved all of it. Honestly, I would have read this book if it was 1,000 pages. So Priory was absolutely phenomenal. I will definitely be reading A Day of Fall and Night. I'm so happy that I finally got to this book in 2023. It was perfect. Coming in at number 6 is definitely one of the most heartbreaking but also bittersweet stories that I've read in 2023, and that is How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. This was absolutely incredible and is another one that I am still thinking about, one that I still flip through and go back and reread certain stories or just reread certain scenes. This is broken up into a lot of different stories across the book, but all of these stories fit one narrative arc. The story begins with this father who goes to the Arctic Circle to pick up with his daughter's research. When he gets there, he finds out that his daughter has been studying this ancient virus that's been preserved in the ice. Pretty soon the ice begins to melt, the virus is released, and from there this entire book and the stories within it become the aftermath of how society has changed, industries that have popped up out of necessity because of this virus that has now plagued the world. And it is just incredible and bleak and heartbreaking. And the second story in here just has to be one of the hardest things that I've read in a very, very long time. But my favorite thing about this book are the stories and how just human they are. And even in the face of this virus and because of this virus, people are dealing with very just human issues, dealing with real emotions, people dealing with loss and difficulties in relationships and loneliness. Just, it's all, I think, captured so brilliantly in this story with this virus just in the background. And not only that, this story just really speaks to humanity's ability to be able to persevere and keep dreaming bigger. I don't know, I get like goosebumps talking about this book sometimes. It is incredible. I love this. I will forever be recommending this book. There are parts in here that made me cry like I have never cried while reading a book before, and it was just absolutely one of the best things that I've read in 2023. We have finally reached the top 5. This always gets a lot more exciting when we get to the top 5, but coming in at number 5 is a book that I love so much, and that is The Rune of Kings by Jen Lyons, and this is the first book in the Chorus of Dragons series. I don't know what to say about The Rune of Kings. This book is so fantastic. This is a book that just put me to work every step of the way. It felt like I was, you know, at the starting lineup and Jen Lyons just took off and left me, and I have nowhere to go. I'm just trying to keep up. This has to be one of the most rewarding reading experiences that I have had in 2023. There are just so many layers to this story. It is by far one of the most complex stories that I've read in 2023. The sheer amount of detail that Jen Lyons puts into this book, into the history, into these characters, into the timeline is incredible. Just the structure of this book, I think, has to be one of my favorites that I've read in a very, very long time, if not my favorite structure ever. Just the way that it's all handled, the way that, you know, things are revealed, and the way that the story unfolds over the course of this book, I think it's so well done in a way that truly just blew my mind this year. There is a lot going on in this story, but at its foundation, we have our main character, Kieran. He's a young man. When we meet Kieran, he is in prison. We don't know why, we don't know what happened, but he's in prison, and another character is also with him. And the story begins when Kieran starts telling the story of his life in his own words, but from a particular point in time. Like, it doesn't start when he's like 5 years old. So it starts at a very particular place in time, but the character that's in that scene with Kieran also begins telling Kieran's story as well. And you get the sense that this character obviously, you know, knows Kieran very intimately, knows the details of his life, and you're just like, who are you? What is going on? But this character begins telling Kieran's story as well, but from a different point in the past of Kieran's life. So we're just watching all of that unravel over the course of this story. But what I think is so incredible is just how everything is woven together, how things are revealed. There are some things that are revealed to us in Kieran's timeline of his life that he's telling us that will only make sense once the other character begins telling their part of the story, and vice versa. And if that's not enough, while we are reading all of that, there is another character in here who is going over the story with us and adding their own footnotes in and correcting things and saying, actually, that's not really how that happened, or just providing more historical detail. It is just so good. It is so good and layered and complex and compelling. I ate this up. It'll definitely make your head spin though, because there are so many parts where characters used to have certain names or used to be these different people, and now they're these people and they show up in scenes in different ways. None of this is making sense if you have not read this book, but this was just phenomenal. I love the entire experience of reading this book and putting the pieces together. And just even on top of that, the story itself is so incredible. I cannot wait to continue with the Chorus of Dragons in the new year. This is truly just a fantastic read. I highly recommend The Ruin of Kings, you guys. Coming in at number 4 is another one that just blew my mind in every way. That is The Helm of Midnight by Marina Lostetter, and this is the first book in the 5 Penalties series. I love this book so much. This is blending so many different genres: mystery, suspense, crime. It's a detective story. Obviously, it's fantasy at its core. Oh my god, the structure of the books I've been reading this year have been standouts like no other year. And The Helm of Midnight is definitely top tier when it comes to that. There are so many different layers to this story and to this world, and I think the way that it all blends together in this first book is just, it's a knockout. It is so incredible. In this book, our main character, Krona, is a regulator, and they regulate the trade and the sale of these masks in the world. They're also like detectives. And in this world, masks can be imbued with the echoes of people who have passed on. People in society like healers, who, you want that knowledge to be passed on. Also in this world, you can have the spirit or the echo of a serial killer imbued in a mask, and that is exactly what sparks the story of this novel. The book begins when the mask that contains the echo of a serial killer is stolen. Now whoever stole it has all of the knowledge, all of the experience of a serial killer who wreaked havoc on this world many years ago. And now this person who has the mask is causing some trouble around the city. And Krona and her band of regulators, they are trying to figure out what exactly is going on and find this person to stop these killings from happening. So that's one layer to the story. But my favorite aspect of this book is that we also have 2 other characters that we're following in different timelines. And I'm not going to touch those timelines at all. We're not going to get into that. But their stories and the information that's revealed in their timelines begins to really inform the way that, that Krona moves in the present day and the things that we learn more in the present day. It is just so incredible. I love the way that the magic is set up in this world. I also love how religion plays a part in this world and how it's kind of infused into the magic in some really compelling ways. I loved it. I loved Krona as a main character. This was top tier, hands down one of the best books of 2023. I cannot wait to read book 2, The Cage of Dark Hours. This was absolutely incredible and I cannot recommend it enough. Now let's get into the top 3. I'm so excited to reveal what these are. Coming in at number 3 is The Tyranny of Faith by Richard Swan, and this is the second book in the Empire of the Wolf trilogy. The first book being The Justice of Kings, which made my best books of the year list last year, and the third book, The Trials of Empire, which is out in February of next year, in which I already have an arc of that I am so excited about. The Tyranny of Faith, this has to be one of the best sequels I've ever read in my life. I'm putting this up there with like sequels like Jade War and Golden Sun. This did what it needed to do, being a second book. When I reviewed this book back in February, I was a little unsure of whether or not I loved it more than The Justice of Kings. And now that this book has sat with me literally all year, I am so happy to say that I actually think I do like this more than The Justice of Kings. I think this just expands the world in some really phenomenal ways. The story doesn't really have a time jump at all from books 1 to 2, except for, just the in-between time of travel when our characters were leaving one part of the world and going to another. But even without it being a large time skip, you still feel like this book brings almost like a different level of maturity to it than the first book did. It's a lot darker than it was. Oh my God, the second half of this book is just unhinged. Things just get incredibly dark. Richard Swan starts bringing in horror elements to it. I loved it. I've said this time and time again, but I just love the themes of morality and law and justice and religion that are all just woven in together into this book. And we just see our characters really trying to maneuver through that, and you see them struggling with that, especially our main character Von Vault and the character of Helena, who's actually telling this story. And just being able to see Von Vault through Helena's eyes, you just get this full picture of who he is. The stakes in this book feel so much higher than they were in the first one, and you can just tell that it is all building up to what is going to be an epic conclusion, because this is not a spoiler at all. You learn this very early on in Justice, but the main character Helena, who's telling us the story, she is narrating this entire trilogy from somewhere in the future, and she is kind of looking back on all of these events, and we're moving through this trying to figure out, well, how are we ever going to get to the point where she's at? And when you're reading Tyranny of Faith, you can just feel that Richard Swan somehow, some way is gonna get us there. This was absolutely incredible. Again, hands down, one of the best sequels I have ever read. I loved it. Now let's get into the top 2 books of 2023. I think you all might be surprised by this number 2 spot, thinking that it would have been my number 1 pick, and that book is Lightbringer by Pierce Brown, and this is the 6th book in the Red Rising saga. Every time I talk about Red Rising or Lightbringer, I really feel like a broken record, but this still is one of the best science fiction series. I always say this, but just from where we started in the first book, Red Rising, you have no idea. You can't imagine it. You have no idea that this is where we are going to end up, that this is where these characters will end up. The relationships that have formed over the course of this series are some of the best that I have ever read. The way that our characters have become like skilled in politics and war, it's mind-blowing how far we have come with this series. And I just think the 6th book, Lightbringer, did a phenomenal job of reminding us not only how far we have come with these characters and what they have been through, because there is so much nostalgia wrapped up into this, but it also sets up where we still need to go and how far we need to go when it comes to that 7th book, Red God. But these characters and just where they stand right now in Lightbringer, I think it is absolutely incredible. In Lightbringer, new loyalties are made, old friendships rekindled, new brotherhoods are formed, and I just love all of the character moments that happen in this book. Some of our characters in this have some of the best heart-to-heart moments that have ever happened in this series. And I think with Lightbringer coming out of something like Dark Age that was just so explosive and so grim and bleak and depressing, coming out of that, I think Pierce Brown did such a phenomenal job kind of resetting the tone for us, having our characters regroup, planning where we're supposed to go next. And it was all so good. I love it. Finally, we have reached the number 1 book of 2023. This almost feels kind of bittersweet saying what it is. The best book that I've read in 2023 was The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu, and this is the first book in the Dandelion Dynasty series. I was really trying to think about what I would say about this book, but phenomenal doesn't even really begin to describe it. This is next level. At this point, this has to be one of the best, if not the best fantasy book I think I've ever read in my life. Yeah, let's put that on camera. I think this is the best fantasy book I've ever read in my life. It was a big goal of mine for this year, just to finally get into the Dandelion Dynasty series. And even before coming in, I was already very familiar with Ken Liu as a short story writer. I've read many of his short stories before in Paper Menagerie. I've read his stories in Hidden Girl and other stories. Ken Liu is a phenomenal writer. I already knew that. Like, his craft is just sharp. The way that he just can build a story in a short span of time, I knew it was incredible. And I do remember saying last year that I was really curious to see how that short story form and how that short story craft that he had built and that he is so phenomenal at would translate into a 4-book long epic fantasy series. And sitting here now, I can say that it's unreal. That's what it is. It's unreal. Ken Liu is probably the only person I can think of, at least right now, he's probably the only writer I can think of who is able to have a structure like this and actually make it an incredible read. There's no other author that I can think of that can actually do this, that can have almost like these snippets of characters, these snippets of scenes that sometimes are only a few pages long, and where you can leave a chapter or leave a character or leave a scene and feel like you just got the full picture of who they are, of what's going on, of a scene that just completely moved the plot forward ahead like 20 paces. There's no other author that I think can do this right now. It's masterful. I think that's the best word. That's like higher than phenomenal in my opinion. It's masterful. There are characters in this that start scheming like at the top of the page, and at the bottom of the page that scheme has already been played out and the other characters are dead. And it's like, what is going on? Again, there are scenes that just kind of come and go pretty quickly, characters that we meet that come and go pretty quickly, but just because the pace of it feels like it's moving a little bit quicker does not take away from the incredible quality of the story, the historical nature of the story. This is like a one-of-a-kind reading experience. I love this book. I am just truly in awe with the way this story is told, that I honestly feel a little speechless when it comes to this book. And I am reading the second book, Wall of Storms, right now, but I've had it on pause because of the Priory of the Orange Tree. But come January 1, I'm back into it and I'm gonna wrap up that book. But I have heard that this series gets better and better with time. And if this is the starting point, this is going to be one of the best fantasy series ever written. If you guys are unfamiliar, this is an epic fantasy story, epic historical fantasy. And actually I would put heavy emphasis on the historical because that history portion feels so much larger than the actual like fantasy elements of this book. But this is an epic historical fantasy, and we have a world that is made up of all these different islands. And before we as the reader even come into the story, one of the islands and one of the leaders of the islands has decided to unify everyone under one empire. And so that unification was brutal. Many people died under this forceful unification. People were relocated, and now we as the reader have come into all of that mess. Now we are experiencing these seeds of rebellion that are beginning to pop up in different ways, and we're following a cast of characters that have their hand in that rebellion in different ways. We do have a very large cast, but even with that large cast, we have two central characters that we do follow over the course of this story, Kuni and Mata. I'm not going to get into it, but who are very important in their own ways and who come together in some really unforgettable ways in the face of this rebellion and to kind of chart their own paths forward, not only for themselves but for the people. And again, I'm speechless. I am speechless with what Ken Liu has been able to accomplish with this story. The Grace of Kings is my #1 pick for the best book of 2023. If you guys have still not read this, or if it's just been on your radar, if it's been on your TBR, I need you to go out and get this book. I need you to go read it, and I need you to get into it because this is the best in the fantasy game right now. So that is it for me, you guys. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. I cannot believe we have another best books of the year video under our belts. It's a good feeling. So yeah, one more video to come in 2023. We're gonna wrap up everything I read this year. We're gonna go through some stats. We're gonna talk about letting go of some reading goals in the new year, and we're gonna prepare ourselves for the reading year of 2024. So thank you guys again for watching this video, and I will see you for our final one of 2023 on Sunday. Take care.